All right. So, Kris, thank you so much for being with us here today. And I'm really excited to get into our conversation about, folks who menstruate. And I just want to put some emphasis on, folks who menstruate because I learned that terminology from you. You have this really interesting way of speaking to people who are not only just women, but people who also, don't identify as women, but they have menstruation. I think that's really very, very inclusive of your practice. And so I really admire how you do that. Um, so even though we're talking about menstruation, we're also talking about women's health. And we're talking about, some of the terms that we use in Chinese medicine. So I know that a lot of the terms are going to come across as, weird and strange. So yeah, I would love for you to kind of like just share with us, what those terms mean. But in any case, gosh, there's a lot to get into. So I just want to say thank you for being here, and I'm so excited to just kind of like go through my list of questions that I know will help a lot of people around the country understand, their bodies a lot better
Yeah.
than they do.
Well, I just want to thank you for the invitation. I'm honored.
Awesome. So, let's talk a little bit about, let's start off with, how our health as, folks who menstruate, how it's looked at today and how it's treated. Because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding around, how Western medicine treats, this our body, and how little information there is in Western medicine. So, can you give us a little overview of how our bodies are, I guess, our health is taken care of in the West from a Western standpoint?
Yeah, so I feel like here our culture focuses on fragmentation and disconnection. Everything's just kind of, kept in a little box and seemingly not connected to one another. And so when we talk about menstruation, it's not emphasized that that is a true reflection and almost like a vital sign in itself of how you're doing, how your health is. And so here in our culture, we don't kind of embrace it. It's almost like it's kind of like in the back of our minds. It's a nuisance. It's like something that comes around every month, and we try to hide it. And so it's not approached in a context of like, this is a true part of your whole hellness. Oh, sorry. That it's I gotta edit that out. Okay, let me start over. Yeah, so it's an interesting question. Here in the West, in our modern culture, we seem to think of things as being disconnected and not related to one another. So when it comes to menstrual cycles, it's like that thing that happens to us. It's a bit of a nuisance, and it's not really seen as something that is really part of our entire wellness in a very holistic way. Yeah, and it's really important, actually. It's like a vital sign.
We have this way of, I guess, describing women's health in stages. And I feel like when I was growing up, I didn't really know much about these stages. I remember when I got my first period when I was 12, and I was on an aircraft. I was flying, somewhere, and I was like, "Oh, what's going on? Nobody ever told me about this." And now that I'm like, in my 40s, I'm thinking, gosh, my body is changing so dramatically. So can you kind of like tell us a little bit about the stages that a woman goes through according to, Eastern practices?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So I like to talk about it almost like a continuum. It's little kind of stories that happen and journeys that happen along your whole journey, your whole menstrual continuum, and they're all intricately connected to one another. So things that happen kind of, at menarche and through menstruation and pregnancy and fertility and postpartum really do influence how you experience perimenopause and menopause. They're all connected on this like one story, and it's just kind of these journeys along the way, and they're all influenced by each other.
Yeah, they're like you said, it's all connected to nature, and the more that we understand nature, the more that we're like in our element of just, you know, embracing nature, we begin to experience this like innate ability to realize that
Yeah.
okay, there's an ebb and flow with who
Yeah.
we are as humans and as you know, women who menstruate. So you know, I remember you posting or commenting on a post some time ago about how, you know, Western medicine doesn't really view food as something that is like evidence based, and but you, in all of the courses that you teach and everything that you really like, the content that you create, you have like this really interesting focus on food. How important is it that we eat the proper foods when we are going through these different cycles in our life?
Yeah, so this is another area where I feel like things are just so fragmented in our modern culture, and thinking that food has absolutely no influence on our well-being and health. So, you know, in ancient times, it was absolutely crucial that individuals really kind of flow with the seasons in order to thrive, in order to survive. And so now in our modern culture, we kind of feel like that's not an important aspect of health, and it very much is. So when it comes to food, these are the actual kind of building blocks in order to be able to have the possible nutrients to even have our mechanisms work properly. So food is crucial to overall health, wellness, overall wellness. Yeah.
Well, overall health too. You know, they're
Yes.
both, it's, you know, it's interchangeable. I get what you're saying. And you know, another thing too is that what really gets me is the birth control. You know, there's so many different types
Mm,
of birth control out there, and I think this is a really important topic to touch on, because a lot of women, or a lot of just, you know, people who menstruate are being given birth control to control either blood clotting or you know, pain. And it's just like,
mm,
you know, there's a better way to do this. And so I remember growing up, that was the first thing that was recommended to me. And so I went on the shot, the Depo-Provera shot, for like 5 years. And
yeah.
it wasn't until I started diving into Eastern medicine and realizing that, whoa, you know, what am I doing? I'm stopping my body from menstruating for forever, pretty much for as long as I'm on the shot. So, you know, how much is birth control affecting our reproductive organs and our hormones? And, you know, what are some things that you could recommend, or what would you suggest in
Mm.
place of birth control?
So birth control is exactly for that. It's to help control birth or possible birth. And so in the right context, birth control is really helpful, especially for individuals, you know, in countries where they don't have, you know, a say in their birthing and having choice with that. So it's actually really empowering to have a choice like that for birth control. I think where it gets a little bit dangerous is when it moves beyond the scope of birth control and it's used as just kind of a blanket slate. You know, it's like, oh, you're coming in for painful periods, let's put you on birth control. Oh, you're coming in for heavy periods, birth control is the answer. You know, birth control doesn't regulate periods. It hacks your system, it controls your system, and your bleed that you have on birth control is not an actual period. So essentially, it's kind of mimicking a body to almost function as male physiology, but in a woman's body. And so that kind of miscommunication month after month after month really does something to your entire system. And so if you read through the entire, you know, pamphlet that they give you, there's so many side effects that happen. And in the realm of Chinese medicine, this cold introduction of this pharmaceutical impedes circulation. It it introduces cold phlegm essentially. So it's like very viscous to all of your veins and blood cell, everything in your body just kind of slows down and gets kind of clogged up. And that's not beneficial for health.
That definitely resonates with me now that I know what I know now.
Yeah.
So you have this passion about this aspect of our health, and in Eastern modalities, when you approach like further education, or when you finish school, you either take an approach of going down the women's health, or you go down general practice, which is addressing pain. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you actually ended up creating or cultivating this passion in this area of Eastern medicine?
Yeah, so I think for me, my mom's from South Korea, and so I was always kind of exposed to, herbs cooking in the kitchen, just adding astragalus or dates kind of in like chicken soup or something like that. So I think very kind of sensorially, I've been exposed to just the knowing of different ways of approaching health. And I remember distinctly my mom talking about the blind acupuncturist and how everybody goes to see the blind acupuncturist because their senses are just so on it. Um, yeah, but I think what kind of drove me to pursue it, like actually as a career, was when I actually um, experienced my own kind of health challenges, being a preteen and having this kind of sudden thing happen to me where I had to go to the emergency room and subsequent surgery, and coming out of surgery like, oh, you have this autoimmune condition. And so immediately I was put on, steroids and all the concoction of all the things the doctors suggested. And I was on that for like a really short time. My body did not feel well. I did not feel well. And my mom was like, get her off of those things. We're going to manage stress. We're going to approach it with food. And so, yeah, I was never on like pharmaceuticals to kind of manage an autoimmune condition. And so I think as I got older, I just kind of knew that that's the route that I wanted to go. It took me a while to get there, because life happens. But I got there, and it's the best decision that I ever made. I would say when I kind of picked my kind of speciality or my focus and my passion for like menstrual health and the menstrual continuum was when I was actually in school, and I was pregnant twice during actual acupuncture school. And so I lived it. I experienced kind of how Eastern medicine had this really radical approach to a pregnant body's health, and how they viewed birth and throughout all the months of pregnancy, and how postpartum is crucially important to the health of the mother, the health of the baby, the health of the family, the health of the community, and beyond, and how it just has this like kind of concentric circle influence, and just how that was really emphasized. And I was like, I'm in this. I was like, I want to do this. Yeah.
I think you were probably the first person that introduced me into the evolution of creation of life, because I was born in a hospital, and I don't have children, but when I look at all of the things that you talk about, and you talk about how important it is to have going through postpartum, and maybe even having a natural birth if you can. You're the one who turned me on to like encapsulating your placenta, and I'm like, what? I never heard of that. And so, and also you turned me on to other things like hydrotherapy, peri-steam, and I just thought, wow, this medicine is more deeper than I ever thought it was.
Yeah.
I really love how you take it that much further. And I feel like more people, more women are becoming more turned on to this, because it seems like Western medicine is just like, oh, we're just going to have a cesarean, we're just going to cut you open and take the baby out and you're going to be okay, when there's actually, something that happens during that birthing process that is not only sacred, but it's also for the health of the baby that's being born. So that's like a whole nother like aspect.
That's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
Completely. So, there are terms that you bring up that are so eloquent and so poetic in the way that you describe women's health. And I like to go over them before we actually get into like the actual, meat and potatoes of the session. So could you clarify, what does it mean when you say Jing essence, or when you refer to our Jing essence?
Yeah, so Jing essence, I think, put simply, is kind of like ancestral medicine. And I love how poetic that is. But essentially, it's like the most dense kind of makeup of your being. And so it's a culmination of two things. It is like your ancestral kind of lineage, what you bring into the world from your past, your parents, your, ancestral lineage. You can kind of think of it as like DNA, right? But then the other part of it is post-heaven essence, which is kind of like how you live your life, your lifestyle, your work habits, your emotional well-being, your mental well-being, nutrition and movement, and all of those things. So those things combined is like your essence, your Jing. And it really reflects kind of the trajectory of your lifespan, your aging process, your development, and so forth. And so menstrual blood, sperm, these are all reflections of Jing essence. And so when you kind of think of it in that context, and you know how precious it is, you kind of see your menstrual blood and sperm as like this extra vital sign. And then you kind of think like, well, I do have a menstrual cycle every single month. How can I care for my essence? How can I care for my body in a very Jing-centered way?
Wow. You see what I mean by poetic?
It's like poetry, right?
Poetry.
But, yeah, and so I feel like the language is so important, right? And so when you see, and it's all about context and framing. And so when you start your period and you have this framework of understanding, like you need to hide it, it's shameful, it's going to be painful, it's going to be a nuisance, it's a burden for the rest of your life, and it's something that happens to you every single month, you kind of carry that with you. You carry that language with you. But imagine if you were celebrated, if you're monarchy, like, and it was celebrated in saying that you're starting your cyclical journey, and it's something to actually honor each month. Yeah.
I think that would just really change our perception as women. You're like, well, I'm powerful. I can give birth.
Yes.
It isn't to celebrate, So let's every practitioner that I work with has a very interesting way of describing chi. And I would love to hear your explanation based on, the practice that you are passionate about. So how do you describe what chi is in this context?
It's difficult actually, because how we translate it really easily over here in the West is like, oh, it's energy, but it's so much more than that. It is like it's like effervescent. It's like a mist. It's something that touches, but you can't see it. It's this kind of driving force, but it's like it's so hard to explain, but it's absolutely essential for existence and for health. And you can have a relationship with your chi, with your energy, if you want to call it. Yeah, it's kind of hard to put into words, but the Chinese language is like pictographs, right? And so like chi is like an image, it's a picture, it's an experience. And to kind of say it, you know, as like a very linear way of like it's energy, like it's bigger than that. It's yeah.
I agree. I agree with you that it is an experience, because there's so many different types of chi. There's
Mhm.
chi, the essence. There's, the primordial chi, the Jing essence also is like a form of, chi and energy. And our emotions are also affected by
Yes.
this type of chi that we either cultivate or, create. So you're right. It can be described in so many different ways because we're that much of a dimensional being. So I appreciate.
Yeah. Very dynamic. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about, what does it mean when you say jade gate? What is our jade gate?
Oh, yeah. Let's jump into that. Jade Gate. um, so the way that I approach and what I do is really kind of educate. And my whole passion and purpose is how to kind of switch the paradigm in conversations around menstrual health, vaginal health, breast health, and really put it into the hands of my clients so that they can take ownership of it. And so when you talk about things in a very clinical way, um, it doesn't sink into the bones, right? But this is where language and poetry and so forth can kind of seep in and really. Um, and so Jade Gate is just another way of saying vagina, and vagina is like, it's a very kind of clinical sounding word, and it actually means like sheath or something where something goes in. And so when I was naming my course, I really wanted it to be a bit more approachable. And so Jade Gate is, a Chinese bedroom arts term. Yeah.
I love it. So eloquent. And then what about when you mention things like yang wei, heavenly water?
Tiangue, yeah. Yeah, so this is another thing. It's like, menstrual blood is actually tiangue, which means heavenly or celestial water. And so there is this understanding that this is what creates life. And every single person on this planet was touched by tiangue, heavenly water. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so let's now get into the topics that you are basically dedicating your life to. Let's talk a little bit more about or about our breast health. I remember growing up as a kid. Developing into having breast was kind of like an embarrassing thing. You get training bras, and then all of a sudden you grow up, and then you get to a certain age, and you're like in college, and then these days a lot of women are deciding to get breast implants, and then a lot of
Mhm.
women later on in their life are getting them taken out. So
Yeah.
what is our breast health in Eastern medicine, and how does it correlate to the rest of our hormones, and just how much of a of a part of our body is this?
Yeah. So our breasts in Chinese medicine are considered yin accumulation. So yin is kind of like the substance of the body. And so because of their, anatomical makeup of like mostly fat mammary glands and I'm blanking out right now, and lymph tissue, it's like all traversed with that. It needs a lot of yang energy. It needs circulation. And so I teach a course on actual breast massage and rejuvenation practices as a preventative because they actually require a lot of circulation because they're yin accumulations. So the same hormones that affect your menstrual cycles also influence your breast tissue because the glandular tissues that are in there, and also because of the fat. Fat tends to kind of collect and store and so forth, especially kind of estrogen, mostly estrogen. And so this is also something that's very disconnected. It's like here in our culture, they're hypersexualized. Breasts are like hypersexualized, and the only time we ever think about them are when we find something or they hurt or maybe with breastfeeding. And so they're not really approached as kind of a part of our entire well-being. So because the same hormones affect your menstrual cycle, affect your breast, um, we can have a lot of influence over our breast health. The same way we would approach our menstrual cycles and regulating them holistically, we can also do that with our breasts through activation and yang and engagement. Yeah.
So let's talk about that next. Our vaginal ecology. They're so, intricately correlated. What does that really mean? Our vaginal ecology.
Yeah, so it basically means that your vaginal environment it's like its own little ecosystem, and it has like this really delicate balance of moisture and pH and sugar and immune cells and yeast and bacteria. It's like thriving in there, and it's actually naturally acidic and to protect our body from any invaders or whatever. Um, but I call it sacred vaginal ecology because this is another area that we just don't talk about enough. It's almost like it's the same old story. It's just things are so separate, and so when something's happening in this area, challenge you go to a doctor and they give you all kinds of over-the-counter medications or really harsh medications. They're not looking at the whole body. And so recurrence rate is really high with like vaginal infections, and the doctors are just continuing to like, oh, just take this, put that in there, whatever. They're not considering that your vaginal ecology is influenced by your entire ecology. They're connected. They're so connected. And so that's like a very holistic approach to vaginal health is like, well, how's the rest of your body doing? Yeah.
It's really, I'm glad that you mentioned that, how, we're just given one medication after the next, because that's exactly the life that I live. That's what happened to me. I was given, ciprofloxacin and then another one and then a different one. And my body just was not being balanced out at all. And I just thought,
Yeah.
what do I have to do? And it was Eastern medicine that brought me to bringing my body back into balance. And then it just like changed my whole outlook and perspective on women's health. And that's when I really I just started to value my personal vaginal health more differently than I ever had. And
Yeah.
I think
It's like we don't question it, right? Because we have given up so much power over autonomy over our bodies. We trust the medical profession and the FDA to have like really safe products and drugs and medicines for our body. And so we don't question that. So when we go down the vaginal health aisle at the pharmacy or whatever, there's all these products there that are really, really harmful. They don't consider the entire body. They don't consider side effects. They just want to fix it, right? And they're really harsh products. It's like your vaginal environment is so porous and it's like a sponge. So, everything that you're introducing in there, all your menstrual care products and so forth, I mean, you really want to pay attention to what's in those things because your body is absorbing it.
Yeah. And our body goes through a cycle. I mean, it goes through many cycles. It goes,
Yeah.
all I can remember is on your Instagram and on your website, you just have circles everywhere. It's really interesting because your illustrations are just so ancient but modern. And so tell us a little bit about this 7-year cycle that we
Mm.
experience in our bodies.
Yeah, so in Chinese medicine is an observation of nature. It's an observation of human nature and our interaction with our outside world, our inside world. And so through thousands of years of observation, what they come to realize is that we have these distinct cycles that we go through. So it's like the 7 and 8 year cycles. So 7-year cycles for those of us that menstruate and 8 years for those of us that don't menstruate. So every 7 years, your body goes through almost like a whole regeneration and you're shifting wheels almost. And so there's a real opportunity to enhance your health or kind of wreak havoc on your constitution. And so it's like a transition, almost like in seasons. There's a whole paradigm of wellness practices that, with the earthly seasons from, like summer to fall to winter, between those seasons, you really kind of have to anchor in and take care of your body as it transitions through the season so that you don't get ill and don't get sick. The same goes with your life cycles. So every 7 years, so 7, 14, and so on, 21, 28, every 7 years or so, if you pay attention, you'll feel this shift happening, changes, to where your body is such a great communicator. It's letting you know, I'm dealing with a lot. Maybe we need to simplify. We need to kind of go a little bit more inward and reevaluate what we want to bring forward into our next cycle and what we really truly want to let go.
So it's more than just like a physical experience. It's like even like an emotional experience, as well as like, what we want to bring into this world, what we want to birth into this world.
Yeah, it's all of it. Yeah.
And, you also talk about the 3 golden year opportunity. I feel like, am I reaching my golden years, and is it something to look forward to? Or, like, I don't feel like I'm getting older, but, I get age is just a number too. But what does it really mean to go through this 3 golden year, and why do you call it an opportunity?
So the 3 golden opportunities are, and this is not, coined from me, this is actually from our medicine. So the 3 golden opportunities are really that they're opportunities to really enhance our constitutions or wreak havoc on them. So this is really catered towards those of us that actually menstruate. So if we kind of come in with the context that our Jing essence is so precious and that this is going to carry us through our whole longevity process, aging process, development process, we come in with that understanding and we add in 3 key times that we really need to hone in and take care of ourselves. It's through our monthly menstrual cycles, it's through postpartum care, and it's through our journey into perimenopause. These are the 3 key opportunities where our bodies go through like a very natural kind of Jing allocation. Like a lot of Jing is allocated towards our monthly menstrual cycles. A lot of Jing loss happens in postpartum. And then in perimenopause, that's a big wheel shift where we're coming in with month after month, year after year of this regular cycle of our menstrual cycles. And then all of a sudden that communication is changing and it's saying, you know what, this reproduction thing is not a sustainable state for our longevity. We need to shift wheels. We need to allocate all of that Jing that comes into reproduction. We need to keep that for ourselves so that we can live longer. And so when we come up to the doors of perimenopause, our experience is really about how we show up to the doors to perimenopause. Are we coming in with a lot of Jing loss? Are we coming in with just nothing in our savings account, right? And so I think that's why we hear all these kind of horror stories about perimenopause and menopause, is because we're not given the correct context to really live kind of a Jing-centered life. We just run through our savings account, really. And so they are opportunities. And so just because, maybe in previous years you burning the candle at both ends, you're not living a Jing-centered life, just because that is the case doesn't mean that you can't make some really amazing changes in order to influence your perimenopausal journey and your menopause journey.
And I think that for me, that's the essence of why we're having this conversation, not just for myself, because I feel like that's where I'm kind of like pivoting to in my life. But
yeah, same here.
But also because I feel like there's a lot more women that I can relate to who have either gone through this and they've shared with me their stories, and I'm just like, gosh, there's got to be another way. And it's just so interesting how we can not only right now I can relate to both sides. I can relate to the women who are actually, you know, going through perimenopause or who have, and I hear their stories, but then I can also see the women who are, you know, much younger than me. And it's really interesting how, you know, this is a story. This is a story of our life. And we
Mm,
can all obviously shift and change the narrative when
yes.
we understand how to, you know, talk about this from in a different context. So I'm really glad about that you're really like changing and shifting the way we think about our gynecological health. Um,
Yeah.
let's talk about enhanced fertility. You know, I think that there's a lot of women out there who are going through, you know, infertility. How, why, you know, and they are being guided and directed to taking some of the most expensive ways to become pregnant, when really in our medicine, it's all about, you know, how do we cultivate that womb that is prepared for fertility, you know. So
Mm,
can you tell us a little bit more about, you know, how is it that our medicine can really enhance infertility?
mm. So we look at the entire individual. I think that's first and foremost the most important aspect. So when you come to us for fertility enhancement, we're looking at you as a whole person because it matters. It really does. We're not only focused on your hormones, we're not only focused on womb health, we're working because optimum health equals fertility. And so I think when the whole Chinese medicine approach is you look at each individual as an individual because their patterns of infertility might be different than another person walking through your door. But it is like a holistic kind of perspective, your whole body wellness. Because actually, when you get pregnant, you want to be well. You want to be able to carry that pregnancy and feel vital and healthy. So if we're just kind of forcing a pregnancy without looking at the whole body health, it's not really a benefit to the person who's pregnant and has to hold that pregnancy and then have the subsequent birth and postpartum and breastfeeding and, you know, that whole healing process. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, that's such a deep conversation, and you know, I feel like we could do an entire summit on women, on,
Yes.
you know, folks who menstruate and fertility. And it's not just fertility for, you know, women or people who want to carry, but it's also for, you know, the other sex. You know, men who are probably not as fertile either. You know, and we can also
Mm,
address those things. For example, you know, I didn't realize that peri-steam is something that can be done for both sexes.
yeah.
And when I had mentioned this to a client of mine, that, hey, you know, this would be a really great way for you to reduce the size of the prostate to, you know, so that way you have a better flow of urination. And I can't tell you like how over the moon he was after one treatment of, you know, steaming, that his just urination, his flow just like came back to normal, you know,
Yeah.
after all these years of going on, you know, different herbs and medication and then taking all these tests and these checkups. It's just really interesting how the body can just pivot, you know,
Mm,
with that little nudge, you know. So
yeah. Such a humble, simple, practical practice. Yeah.
yeah,
Perry State.
and
Mhm.
it's like that is great for not only those who want to carry, but also for men too. And you know, it does help enhance fertility because it cleans us up, it cleans us out. But you know, fertility and enhancing our fertility is just such a deep topic.
Yeah, it is.
So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about the perimenopause years. You call it the second spring. Is this something to look forward to? I mean, like really, like why do you call it the second spring?
Well, it's because we go through like the 5 element cycles as we kind of go through our 7-year cycles. Each kind of cycle or group of cycles are correlated to 5 elements or an element. Um, so second spring is actually postmenopausal. So perimenopause is actually kind of like and so we come back into spring in menopause, right? So perimenopause is like the metal element. And so if we think about metal element in Chinese medicine, it's all about clarity. And so you're coming out of your kind of earthy reproductive years. The wheels are shifting, priorities are changing. Your body is maybe a bit more fatigued. So you really just have to get clear. You have to go through almost like a detox and Marie Kondo things, and really simplify so that you only carry into your kind of wise years or elder years the things that really bring you joy. Yeah.
Wow, this is so much more eloquent than Western medicine, that's for sure. I mean, not to discredit Western medicine in any way, but
Yeah.
I just want to be in it as much as you are. It's interesting how you describe this, but you talk about all of these topics that we talked about are all topics that you have created courses around, and you make them so accessible, and it's like you woo us into understanding our anatomy in a way that it's never been described. And so, even though all these topics are such, deep topics, you don't have to be, super smart, or you don't have to be a doctor. This is like
No.
that you learn. This is for everybody and anybody, just to kind of understand a little bit more about how their body is working. So I appreciate the journey that you have gone on and how long it took you. I'm so glad you stuck with it, because
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone else out there who actually creates this type of opportunity for women, or for just people who menstruate, to understand their system and how they can bring it back into harmony. So I'd love to go over some of the recommendations that you would give your younger self, knowing what you know now.
Oh, little Kris.
Yeah, because you're just this wise, brilliant person who I believe, I'm sure there's a lot of people who have influenced you as well. And
Yes.
here you are, just kind of like educating us and wooing us into, other things that can help us. So, from an emotional aspect, because I feel like our emotions is really an important part of our hormonal system,
Yeah.
how would you recommend your younger self how to handle your emotions, or what would you do to support your emotions, knowing what you know now?
I think the first step is always actually embracing and identifying emotions, because I don't think that we live in a culture where that's kind of allowed. It's like, as kids, if we get angry or whatever, it's not like, oh gosh, babe, are you angry? It's just like, hey, get rid of that, or put that away. It's not appropriate right now. So I think identifying emotions and getting curious about, instead of like judging ourselves when we feel something, more getting curious about like, why is this coming up? How does that feel in my body? And I think when we almost allow ourselves to just soften into that, it almost is more transient than gets stuck. And we don't like get stuck in those things. It's like we allow ourselves to experience the full range of human emotions. It's very human to experience emotions. I think that's the first thing. I think for me personally, to help myself regulate through the full range of emotions is just to first acknowledge them, and then help myself move through them. Either movements in my body, making weird sounds, going out into nature, just putting my feet like on the grass, in the sand, touching plants. Yeah, just like allowing the movement and metabolism of the emotions. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I think that, well, growing up for me myself, I went through such fluctuations. I traveled around a lot, and I just feel like I didn't know how to handle my emotions back then. And now that I'm just kind of like learning more about myself, I feel like I'm more balanced, because things don't bother me as much because I'm looking at them. So I think if we just take a look at understanding why am I so angry at this, and
Yeah.
that bothered me so much, and then that can, instead of just like harboring it and creating stagnation in our body, I agree,
Or resisting it,
or resisting
right?
it, that
Mhm.
emotional, creating a relationship, rather having an emotional disconnect,
Yeah.
and separating ourselves and saying, I don't want to feel that way. But instead you're going in and you're like thinking, why do I feel this way? And not
Mm.
taking on the judgment, but just kind of like going through the experience. And I like how you convey that it's all an experience and we just have to learn how to.
Yeah. It makes me think about PMS, premenstrual syndrome. I like calling it premenstrual strength. Um, and if you kind of sink into why that tension builds, why maybe you don't have like a broad tolerance for little things or whatever, like just get curious about that. It might be your body's signals to protect itself. It might be your body building good boundaries. It might be your body saying, hey, that's enough, I can't handle that, I need to take care of myself. It doesn't all have to be like this negative kind of attribute to like PMS syndrome. It could be your body getting ready to kind of cycle to your period time, where it's like I'm collecting and I'm going a little bit more inward. I'm taking care of myself because I'm about to bleed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just great. And I think that emotional support is useful even after, in those times of where we're shifting from bleeding to the perimenopause stage too. I feel like we're still learning about ourselves emotionally. So let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the lifestyle. What kind of recommendations would you give someone lifestyle wise? I mean, I know there's so many
Oh
recommendations,
yeah.
right? But what would be your top few?
I think my number one recommendation is to honor rest and recovery, and how important that is. I think our culture just perpetuates like the constant go, million things on your to-do list, and it doesn't emphasize rest and recovery and how important that is to cycle through.
We're definitely a rajasic. We say rajasic in yoga terms. We're just constantly going. We're like in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Always trying to strive to become more, get through a program. And I'm guilty of that. I'm like, I want to get done so I can hurry up and have that designation. And I want to hurry up and build this practice. But really, I'm like, now I'm feeling like, oh, okay, this is a lifestyle and nothing's going to happen
Yeah.
overnight.
And
And
your body is such an amazing communicator to let you know when, because that's not sustainable, right? And so I wonder if we can, instead of focusing on like time, because like, oh, time's running out. If we focus on energy more, like how's my energy doing? We can be a lot more productive.
I like that. I like that a lot. And how about food? Within the 5 branches of TCM, food therapy is like,
Mhm.
one of the most important ones with your. And I remember I see a lot of, I see that you have a few recipes for congee, which is a nice porridge that is cultural to the Eastern practices. And
Mhm.
so why is food important, and what are some of the recommendations that you would suggest
Mhm.
for those who miss it?
Food is so important because it's something that your body requires, and all of the nutrients that you break down are so essential for every single process in your body. Um, I feel like food meets you where you're at, especially when you live seasonally, and you're eating kind of seasonal fruits and vegetables. So I would say, my top recommendation for food therapy is to almost embrace kind of the yin hibernation of your period, and because it's like your inner winter. And like, what kind of foods do you eat in the winter time? Is it like the smoothies or your iced lattes? No, it's warm, nourishing, comforting food. Yeah.
Yeah. That I think that in our culture we focus so much on the nutritional value of some foods, And we don't realize how the therapeutic value, you know, the temperature of a food, and why we're not having smoothies in the wintertime, but instead we're having, you know, warm porridges or oatmeals, and, you know, why that's better for us. And I love how since I've been studying TCM, Eastern medicine, I've just seen how my body doesn't, you know, carry as much weight as some people that I've noticed, and that I just have a different respect for food, you know, like I don't overindulge. I used to come from a lifestyle where I was afraid I wasn't too sure I would get my next meal. And so there was like that
Mm,
food scarcity, and realizing what food can do for you and therapeutically has allowed me to pick foods based on how I am feeling and the season that I'm going through, the cycle that I'm.
yeah, yeah. Food is so sacred, and I think I have a garden here, and this year it finally we finally had like a really flourishing garden. My husband and I have been trying to grow food for many, many years, and this year was like so fruitful. And it's a humbling experience to grow your own food. And so I think that we've lost that. We've lost like the reverence of food, you know, because it's just kind of readily available and, you know, the lines at the grocery store and so forth. And so I think, you know, your relationship with food is also sacred. Yeah.
Well, good thing I moved to the farm. I think that just, you know, since living out here in Austin, and living on a farm, and you have the opportunity to have organic, fresh food
Mm,
available to you at all times, it's just like, whoa, what a difference that it makes in
yeah.
the taste. And then, you know, the time that I have, because I can just go out into the farm and pick what I want and then just, you know, prepare it. But you're right,
Yeah.
food is a sacred practice, and we kind of like adulterate it when we go out and just get something quick to eat, you know, instead of
Mm,
actually just sitting down and slowing down. And you know, I have a lot of respect for um, the time that we're in, and how we just had to really force ourselves into just like slowing down, you know. And
yeah.
so I'm grateful for that, because if it wasn't for this time, I'm pretty sure I would be on a ship working 7 months straight, you know, treating patients. But now I'm like, oh, wow, this is really different. So I'm
Mm,
ready to like step into that next phase of my life, because I've had time to, like a lot of time to reset. So,
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Kris, for all of the explanations that you've given us. I mean, there are so many things that you are creating and that you continue to create. And the purpose of this was just to really give people a foundational understanding of where we come from an Eastern medicine perspective, when we're talking about our menstruation and the phases that, folks who menstruate and folks who don't menstruate, going through this life, like what to expect and how
Mm,
to pivot from such an unnatural way of handling our health to more of like organic and natural and peaceful way. So I really appreciate your time, and you've been so generous in having this discussion with us. And I just like to ask, do you have any last remarks or anything that you would like to share with our audience who are watching us today?
mm. Yeah, one thing just popped into my mind is that there's always an opportunity to shift. And so, whatever circumstance that you're in health wise, um, it's not like too late, as they say. There's always an opportunity to shift and, yeah, and seek support, build your team. Yes.
Awesome. That's why we're here. We're here to help people shift, to help
Yeah.
people reach their human potential. And it fills my heart that I can provide this information, and I can collaborate with so many practitioners, especially someone like you who's so, skillful and artful and eloquently talking about, this type of modality and this area of our health. So thank you so much, Kris, for our discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, great. See, what do we got?